"He's too slow," Craig shouted, yanking the clipboard from my hands. "This isn't a damn retirement home." The younger guys laughed, guys I trained, while a mislabeled drum hissed inches from my boots. Then came the second blow. HR handed me a packet the next morning, already filled out, fired, effective immediately. 25 years of spotless safety wiped clean by one stopwatch and a lie. No one looked me in the eye, not the crew, not even Sharon from HR. But what Craig didn't know? That same clipboard he tore from me? I'd copied every incident he buried, every mislabeled batch, every skipped check. And I had exactly 3 weeks until the federal inspector walked through our door. Craig thought I was slow. He had no idea how precise I could be. Now he's got the stopwatch. Let's see if he can outrun the truth. My name is David Mercer, and I'm 45 years old. After 25 years working chemical plants, my days revolve around precise valve checks and meticulous gauge readings at Eastern Processing. The familiar sting of solvent and steady hum of pumps used to be a comfort until our new manager, Craig Benton, started his crusade. He prowls the floor with that damn stopwatch, mocking what he calls my old man caution, while my friend Hank Porter, our senior operator, shakes his head at Craig's bonus-chasing methods. Young techs may snicker, but they don't understand that my battered logbook holds every process quirk and safety protocol I've mastered. These rushed batches keep coming in mislabeled, more often since Craig pushed his quotas. But I notice everything, document everything, just like I always have. But let me start from the beginning. That morning started like any other. The plant's familiar heartbeat, pumps cycling, towers humming, rolled through the concrete floor and up through my steel-toed boots. 25 years in, and that vibration still reminded me of my first day, young and scared of making mistakes that could cost lives. Now, at 45, those fears had hardened into careful habits. You ever notice how some smells hit different when something's about to go wrong? The pungent fumes from the reactor area seemed sharper than usual as I worked my way through the drum handling sequence. Each drum needed proper placement, proper timing, proper everything. One wrong move with these volatile chemicals, and, well, let's just say I'd seen the aftermath of rushed work before. I was checking the latest batch when something caught my eye. The label didn't match our usual sequence. Could have been nothing. But in this business, nothing has a way of turning into something real quick. I slowed down, pulled out my logbook, and started cross-referencing reactor compatibility specs. "What's the holdup, Mercer?" Craig Benton's voice cut through the plant noise like a knife. He materialized beside me, that damn stopwatch dangling from his manicured fingers. I could feel eyes turning our way. Mostly the younger guys, eager to see the show. "Drums mislabeled, Mr. Benton," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Need to verify the—" He snatched the clipboard from my hands. "Always an excuse with you, isn't it?" His perfect suit looked out of place against the grimy equipment. "You're too slow to keep up with progress. This isn't a retirement home." The younger workers didn't even try to hide their smirks. I'd trained half of them, shown them every safety protocol they knew. But memory's short when the new boss is putting on a show. "Sir," I kept my voice level, though my hands wanted to shake. "Rushing these batches risks pressure spikes, heat runaways. We've had 3 near misses this month already." "Near misses!" He spat the words. "Because you're looking for problems that don't exist. You're an obstacle, Mercer. This is your final warning. Pick up the pace, or we'll find someone who will." He turned to the line workers. "Move, move, move. Time is money, people." After he stormed off, I pulled out my pocket logbook, the one I've carried for 15 years. My hands were steady as I wrote down the time, the drum numbers, and Craig's words, verbatim. Old habits die hard, and documentation saved more than one life in this business. The digital display on the reactor caught my eye. Numbers crept closer to our safety limits. A relief valve chattered somewhere in the system, and that sound twisted my gut worse than any of Craig's threats. Everything in me screamed to slow the line down, but Craig's words hung in the air like those chemical fumes. I finished my shift in a fog of humiliation. The younger guys wouldn't meet my eyes anymore. Funny how respect can evaporate faster than the solvents we handle. My phone buzzed. Calendar notification for tomorrow. HR meeting, 8:00 a.m. 20 years of perfect safety records. 20 years of training newcomers, spotting problems before they blew up, keeping everyone alive to go home to their families. And now I sat staring at that meeting notice, wondering if all those years could vanish in 10 minutes of some bonus-chasing manager's temper tantrum. The relief valve was still chattering as I clocked out. That sound followed me to the parking lot. like the plant itself was trying to warn me about what was coming. 8 o'clock the next morning hit me like a chemical burn. You know that sterile smell HR offices always have? Like they're trying to sanitize bad news before it spreads? The conference room reeked of it when Sharon from HR waved me in. Her face set in that professional mask they must teach in management school. A printed packet waited on the table. Funny how your whole career can fit in 3 stapled pages. David, Sharon started, shuffling papers like they were fragile explosives. We need to discuss some performance concerns that have been brought to our attention. My throat went dry. I can explain about yesterday. Please let me finish. She glanced at her notes. According to Mr. Benton's documentation, you've shown a consistent pattern of delayed processing times. Your methods are outdated. We need workers who can maintain modern efficiency standards. Ever notice how corporate speak makes everything sound reasonable? Even when they're gutting you? The mislabeled batch yesterday. I tried again. David, this defensive attitude isn't helping. Sharon slid a form across the table. We're terminating your employment. Effective immediately. Just like that. 25 years reduced to a signature line. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I read the termination papers. The language was pure Craig. Failure to adapt. Excessive caution. Impeding workflow. Each phrase twisted like a knife. Your final check will include 2 weeks. Severance, Sharon said, like she was offering a gift. Please clear out your locker and return your security badge before leaving. The walk to my locker felt like a funeral march. Every face turned away when I passed. Guys I'd trained, guys whose lives I'd maybe saved by being too careful. They all found something real interesting to look at on the floor. I grabbed my hard hat, the family photo taped inside my locker, and the safety manuals I'd annotated over the years. The envelope with my final check felt thin against my chest pocket. You want to know the worst part? The whispers. They followed me down the corridor like ghosts. Getting slow. Can't keep up. Maybe it's for the best. In the parking lot, I pulled out my phone. Job boards lit up the screen, but every posting might as well have been a dead end. Supervisor references required. Craig Benton's smirking face flashed in my mind. He owned my future now, and we both knew it. The sun was setting by the time I found myself at O'Malley's, the kind of quiet bar where nobody asks why you're drinking alone at dusk. I spread a napkin on the scratched wooden bar and started writing numbers. Mortgage payment, health insurance, utilities. Each figure felt like another nail in my coffin. Black coffee. A familiar voice cut through my calculations. Hank Porter settled onto the stool next to me, his oil-stained hands wrapped around the mug the bartender brought over. Got a booth in the back, more private. I stared at my half-empty glass. Not much left to talk about, Hank. There's always something to talk about. He studied me with that steady gaze that had seen 30 years of plant politics. You look like a man wondering what his dignity's worth. My laugh came out hollow. Pretty sure Craig Benton already set that price. Hank's phone buzzed. He checked it, then turned the screen my way. A photo of a manila folder, thick with papers. You need to see this. Tonight. The coffee in his cup was still steaming, untouched. Whatever was in that folder. Hank hadn't come here just to share a drink and sympathize. Hank led me to a corner booth where the neon beer signs couldn't reach. The vinyl seats had seen better days. Cracked and patched, like the stories old-timers tell. Remember those places where serious talks happened away from curious eyes? This was that kind of spot. Been keeping these at home, Hank said, sliding the folder across the scratched tabletop. Started my own file when things began feeling wrong. His hands, weathered from decades of valve work, drummed quietly on the manila envelope. I opened the folder, and let me tell you, my coffee went cold before I got halfway through. Every page was like reading my own obituary, if I'd stayed quiet and kept working. Look at this one, Hank pointed, tapping a report from 3 months back. Drum labeled as non-reactive solvent. Actually contained catalyst precursor. Operator caught it during verification step. He flipped to another page. Here's last month. 2 near misses in the same week from rushed transfers. The incident summaries read like a horror story. Each one stamped addressed in red ink, but the corrective actions column stood empty. Just blank spaces where safety measures should have been. Craig's got the leads running scared, Hank said, wrapping his hands around his untouched coffee. Keeps talking about clearing backlogs, streamlining processes. You know what happened to Mike in Unit 3 when he filed that pressure spike report? I shook my head. Transferred to warehouse. Inventory. Night shift. Hank's voice had that bitter edge you get when you've watched good people get ground down. Same thing happened to Paula when she questioned those flow rates. You ever see puzzle pieces suddenly snap together? That's how it felt as I traced the pattern through the reports. Mislabeled batches clustering around month-end, right when Craig's quota pressure peaked. Experienced operators who spoke up getting shifted to dead-end positions. The whole picture was there in black and white. Jesus, Hank. My hands were shaking as I turned another page. This is a powder keg. One rushed batch, one missed check. I didn't need to finish. We both knew how chain reactions worked, in chemistry and catastrophes. Why do you think I kept copies? Hank leaned back, eyes sharp under the dim bar lights. Craig's efficiency updates make inconvenient papers disappear. Official records show a clean plant running smooth as silk. The weight of the folder felt heavy in my hands. Heavier than just paper. This was career-ending stuff. The kind of evidence that could bring down not just Craig, but maybe the whole management chain that let him run loose. I closed the folder carefully, like it might explode. The bar's neon flickered, casting shadows across the damning pile of papers. 25 years in the industry taught me to respect volatile materials. But right then, the most dangerous thing in that bar was sitting right there on that sticky table. So here's the real question, Hank. I met his steady gaze across the booth. Who's actually going to listen? That's the trick, isn't it? Hank replied, finally taking a sip of his cold coffee. Finding someone with enough power to care, and enough spine to act. The folder sat between us like a loaded gun. Everything I needed to prove I wasn't just some washed-up slow hand was right there. But taking aim with evidence this explosive, that was another kind of hazard entirely. The next morning, I spread Hank's folder across my kitchen table, right next to my wife's usual coffee mug. Funny how normal things, a chipped mug, yesterday's mail, look different when your world's spinning sideways. Know what I mean? I started with HR at 8:15 sharp. Made my calls systematic, like running through a startup checklist. Each time, I logged everything in my old work notebook. Names, times, reference numbers. Old habits die hard, I guess. Mr. Mercer, HR's voice dripped with rehearsed patience. Your termination was performance-based. These allegations sound like a disgruntled employee trying to cause trouble. That word, disgruntled. Like getting fired was just me having a bad attitude. My pen pressed hard enough to leave marks on the next page as I wrote it down. Corporate compliance came next. The woman on the line had that tone, you know the one, where you can hear them checking boxes while they talk. We take all safety concerns seriously, Mr. Mercer. We'll review your submission thoroughly. She might as well have been reading a script. Please allow 30 to 45 business days for initial processing. By 10 o'clock, I'd left 3 messages with the state regulatory hotline. Each time, a recording promised someone would return my call, in the order received. Yeah, right. I scanned the most damning pages from Hank's folder and fired off emails. Started getting those automated replies almost immediately. Your concern is important to us. Important enough to sit in a digital inbox somewhere, collecting virtual dust. Around noon, I drove to the regional field office. You know those government buildings? All beige walls and fluorescent lights that make everyone look sick. The clerk behind the bulletproof glass barely glanced up from her computer. Submit your complaint through our online portal, she said, sliding me a wrinkled instruction sheet. Average response time is 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks. My hands clenched around the paper as I walked out. Back in my truck, I couldn't ignore the stack of bills anymore. They'd been riding shotgun all day, getting thicker every time I checked the mail. I spread them across the passenger seat while the sun sank behind the office buildings. Electric bill, mortgage statement, credit card minimum. And there it was. The health insurance premium notice. My wife's medication wasn't something we could skimp on. I circled the due date in red pen, my stomach nodding as I worked the numbers. No matter how I juggled the figures, they wouldn't balance. My phone buzzed around 9 that night. Hank's name lit up the screen. You keeping notes? He asked without preamble. His voice had that bone-deep tiredness I recognized from double shifts. Document everything. Every call, every email. Don't let them grind you down. They're stonewalling me, Hank. Nobody wants to touch this, because it goes deeper than those reports. He paused and I heard ice cubes clinking in what I hoped was just water. Craig's got protection somewhere. Regular inspections getting delayed. Findings disappearing. That takes juice from above. Jesus, Hank. What are we into here? Just keep your powder dry. Don't break. That's what they want. For you to crack. Look unstable. He sounded like a man carrying too much weight. We'll figure something out. The call ended, leaving me staring at the phone's dim screen in my dark kitchen. Then it lit up with a text from Hank. Meet tomorrow. I found signatures you need to see. I set the phone down next to those circled due dates and that stack of unreturned calls. Tomorrow. One more chance to make someone listen before the bills came due. I got to the diner at 6 the next morning, my mouth tasting like I'd been chewing on old pennies. The fluorescent lights made everything look harsh and unforgiving, kind of like how my whole life felt right then. You ever notice how early mornings have a way of making problems seem bigger? The place was empty, except for a waitress refilling sugar dispensers, and one trucker hunched over eggs and hash browns. I slid into our usual booth, ordered coffee more out of habit than need, and waited for Hank. He showed up 5 minutes later, carrying a thick manila envelope that had seen better days. Dark circles under his eyes told me he'd been up most of the night. Without a word, he pulled out a stack of photocopied safety logs and spread them across the scratched Formica table. "Look at these signatures," Hank said, pointing to a series of approval lines. "Notice anything?" I leaned in, squinting through the sleep grit in my eyes. Craig's signature marched down the pages in a neat row. Too neat. Each loop and curve matched the others perfectly, like they'd been traced. "Hold on," I said, pulling out my reading glasses. "This one's dated last Thursday at 2 p.m. I tapped the paper with my index finger. Craig was at the regional office that whole day. I remember because he made a big show of telling everyone about his presentation to the board. Hank nodded grimly. "Keep going. Check the maintenance authorization from B-Shift Tuesday before that." Another perfect signature. Same time Craig had been doing his rounds at our sister plant across town. My coffee sat cooling, forgotten, as we matched dates against what we knew of Craig's movements. "He's been rubber stamping approvals," I said, feeling my throat tighten. "Probably got someone doing it for him when he's not even there. Gets better." Hank pulled out a calendar marked with red circles. "Quarterly inspections coming up. 3 weeks from today." He jabbed his finger at the date. First time in 18 months we're getting fresh eyes from the regional office. The weight of it hit me like a physical blow. 3 weeks. Under normal circumstances, that would have been my chance to flag every corner Craig had cut. But now, I was just some fired malcontent with a bunch of photocopies and accusations. My shoulders slumped as I stared at the stack of bills in my jacket pocket. The mortgage payment was due in 10 days. My wife's prescription needed refilling next week. The math didn't work, and my pride was starting to feel like an expensive luxury. "Maybe," I heard myself say, "maybe it's not worth—" Hank's fist hit the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. The trucker looked over, then quickly back to his plate. 3 weeks is a clock, Dave," Hank said, his voice low and intense. "Make it your ally. They think you're finished. Use that. While they're watching for you to make noise, work the process instead." I straightened up, something clicking into place. "Badge swipes," I said slowly. "Every entry and exit gets logged. And maintenance tickets. They're time-stamped, too." Hank's eyes lit up. "Now you're thinking like you again." I pulled out my own notebook, started sketching out a timeline. We cross-referenced Craig's actual locations against these signatures. Build it step by step. Document by document. "That's the way," Hank nodded. "Small moves, perfect documentation. Just like you taught the new guys before Craig showed up." The waitress topped off our coffees. I watched the steam rise and remembered something my father used to say about patience being another word for preparation. "One question, Hank," I said, closing my notebook. "How do 2 men beat a stopwatch? Ever tried putting together a jigsaw puzzle in the dark?" That's what it felt like, working in Hank's cousin's garage that next week. The place smelled like motor oil and old rubber, but it was private, and privacy was worth its weight in gold right then. We'd hauled in 3 card tables and lined them up under the fluorescent shop lights. You should have seen it. Stacks of binders, piles of printouts, and enough coffee cups to stock a small diner. I'd brought my personal logbooks, 25 years of tiny, precise notes that drove Craig crazy but were about to prove their worth. "Start with the badge swipes," I told Hank, spreading out a sheet of access logs. "Every entry, every exit. Craig can't sign papers if he's not in the building." Hank nodded, already pulling maintenance records from his duffel bag. "Got the work orders here. Time-stamped, countersigned by leads on every shift." I'd grabbed a whiteboard from my daughter's old college days and mounted it on the wall. Started building what we called the matrix. Dates down one side, locations across the top. Every time we found Craig's signature when badge records showed him elsewhere, I marked it with a red X. "Look at this," Hank said, holding up a maintenance ticket. Craig supposedly signed off on the B-line pressure test at 2:15 p.m. on the 12th, but according to his badge log, he was swiping in at the downtown office. I finished, adding another X to the board. "That's number 17. The red marks kept multiplying. Each one represented a moment when Craig had rubber-stamped safety without even being present. But accusations are cheap. Proof needs backbone. We need to make this bulletproof, I said, pulling out fresh binders. Everything gets 3-point verification. If we claim Craig wasn't there, we need badge records, witness statements, and independent confirmation. Way ahead of you. Hank started laying out signed statements from operators and maintenance crews. Got 15 guys willing to put their names down. Each one remembers exactly where Craig was, or wasn't, on specific dates. I spent 3 hours writing the cover memo, keeping it clinical and precise. Explained how mislabeled batches could trigger heat runaways if rushed through the wrong reactor. Drew diagrams showing how pressure spikes compound when verification steps get skipped. Listed every near miss that pointed to the pattern. Try to break it, I told Hank, handing him the first draft of our packet. Pull out any single piece of evidence and see if the story still holds. He did better than that. Spent 2 hours playing devil's advocate, poking holes I hadn't even considered. We rebuilt sections, added backup documentation, and triple-checked every date. The calendar on the wall kept ticking down. I circled next Friday in thick red marker. The last business day before inspection week. Our window for getting the packet into the right hands. Listen, Hank said, his voice dead serious. Once this moves, Craig's going to know exactly where it came from. He's got friends in corporate. You need to be ready. I nodded, sealing another envelope. Each one had to be perfect. Complete copies of every document, every statement, every analysis. No room for missing pages or smudged signatures. The garage had gotten cold. I could see my breath as I stacked the sealed packets, each one representing hours of careful cross-checking. 25 years of experience had taught me that truth needs structure to stand up under pressure. You can't just point fingers. You have to build your case like you're building a chemical process. Methodical, verified, and backed up at every step. Staring at those envelopes, all I could think about was a simple question. When it comes down to it, will an inspector believe a fired troublemaker over a rising star manager? I woke up to the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. No calls, no texts, no emails. Just the mocking glow of my phone showing a dead inbox. You ever notice how rejection feels heavier in the morning? Like gravity's got a personal grudge against you. Pulled up my bank account and wished I hadn't. The spreadsheet I'd made looked like a crime scene. All those red negative numbers bleeding across next week's column. My emergency fund was circling the drain faster than a dropped wrench in an oil pan. Found myself staring at my truck in the driveway. The one thing I owned free and clear. 20 years of payments finished just last spring. Now I was calculating its trade-in value like a man selling his own backbone. Left a taste in my mouth like copper pennies. You're not there yet, I told myself, but my voice sounded hollow bouncing off the kitchen walls. Not by a long shot. The phone buzzed. Hank's name lit up the screen. Stay with the plan, he said, voice steady as a level gauge. The packet speaks for itself. Just needs to reach the right ears. He was right. Facts don't care about bank accounts or wounded pride. They just sit there, patient as rust, until somebody pays attention. I pulled out my printer and loaded fresh paper. Time to put my piece of the story down in black and white. Started with that day on the floor. The mislabeled drums, Craig's stopwatch routine, every word of his too slow speech. The humiliation still burned, but I kept the language clean and professional. No accusations, just observations. Times, dates, drum numbers, exactly what was said and done. Remember those old Perry Mason shows? How every piece of evidence got its own special tab? I went full legal secretary on that packet. Every affidavit, every log entry, every maintenance record got color-coded tabs and crystal-clear labels. Even numbered the pages like they'd end up in front of a judge. You know what kept me going? This wasn't about revenge anymore. Sure, that fire still smoldered in my gut, but something bigger had taken root. I wrote it down in 3 clean lines at the top of my statement. Protect the workers. Protect the community. Protect the plant. Simple as that. 25 years of knowledge screaming that corners don't just cut themselves, they cut people. Had to use a payphone at the gas station to set up the meeting. Felt like a spy movie. But there's no such thing as too careful when you're about to drop a truth bomb. Found a coffee shop with the right layout. Busy enough to blend in, quiet enough to talk. Back table, clear view of both exits, no security cameras aimed that way. Tomorrow morning, I told Hank. 6 sharp. Packed everything into my old backpack, the one that still smelled faintly of my kids' high school gym clothes. Double-checked every tab, every page, every seal. ran through the whole sequence in my head. Walk in casual, order coffee, drift to the back table like I'm just another early bird looking for quiet. Set my alarm for 6 and tried to sleep. The backpack sat by the door like a guard dog, full of paper teeth just waiting to bite. Funny how documents in plastic sleeves suddenly feel like armor plates. Lying there in the dark, I wondered if courage could really be that simple. Just facts and figures sealed in clear sleeves, waiting for their moment to speak up. But that's the thing about truth. It doesn't need fancy words or dramatic gestures. It just needs somebody stubborn enough to carry it where it needs to go. The coffee shop smelled like fresh grounds and warm paper, that mix you get when office workers camp out with their laptops all day. 2 days before D-Day, and my hands weren't quite as steady as I wanted them to be. You ever try to look casual while carrying enough documents to sink a career? It's harder than you'd think. I'd picked this place because it had that copy shop next door. The kind where small businesses print their invoices and college kids bind their thesis papers. Made sense that someone might be reviewing documents here. Nothing suspicious about that, right? The inspector sat exactly where we'd agreed. Corner table, back to the wall, facing both exits. Professional habit, I guess. She looked exactly like you'd expect. Crisp blazer, practical, shoes, reading glasses on a chain. The kind of person who probably alphabetized her spice rack at home. Coffee? She asked, gesturing to an empty cup across the table. Already over-caffeinated, I said, settling into the chair. Didn't mention I'd been up since 4, rehearsing this moment. Remember those old training sessions where they'd make us present safety procedures to the whole crew? This felt like that, but with about 1,000 times more riding on it. I laid out the exhibits one by one, each in its crystal-clear sleeve, each with its color-coded tab. Started with the mislabeled batch documentation, the foundation everything else built on. Here's where the verification process broke down, I explained, pointing to highlighted dates. And here's where the signatures start showing up when badge records prove certain people weren't even on site. She asked questions like a surgeon probing a wound, precise, methodical, never giving away whether she was finding what she expected. Wanted to know exact temperatures during specific batch transfers, chemical compatibility matrices, the whole 9 yards. Good thing I'd spent 25 years learning this stuff inside and out. These signature patterns? She said, tapping one page with a manicured nail. Walk me through your authentication process. So I did. Showed her how we'd matched badge swipes against maintenance logs, how certain names appeared in impossible places at impossible times, the kind of details that only jump out when you've spent weeks connecting dots. Through it all, her face stayed neutral as a blank gauge. Ever try reading someone who's professionally trained not to be read? Like trying to guess pressure through a painted-over sight glass. The process will run its course, she said, finally, sliding the packet into her briefcase. That was it. No promises, no hints, not even a nod to suggest which way she was leaning. I stepped out into afternoon heat that hit like a blast from an open furnace door. My shirt stuck to my back, and I couldn't blame it all on the weather. Did she believe me? Was I just another disgruntled ex-employee filing paperwork that would disappear into some government drawer? Walked home the long way, counting calendar squares in my head. 48 hours. 47 hours and 50 minutes. 47 hours and, well, you get the idea. Reviewed every exhibit in my mind, looking for weak spots or missing links. The kind of obsessing that doesn't help but you do anyway. Hank called after sunset. Plant's quiet, he reported. Just regular chatter about routine inspection prep. Nobody's running scared yet. I looked at my kitchen table, covered in unpaid bills arranged by due date like some kind of depressing timeline. Started cleaning them up, organizing them into neat stacks. Funny how bringing order to small things helps steady your nerves about the big ones. Radio silence from here on out, I told Hank before hanging up. No calls, no texts, no nothing until this plays out. Set my alarm for dawn. Wanted to watch the plant parking lot from Joey's diner when inspection day hit. Needed to see who showed up early, who looked nervous, who tried too hard to look calm. Lying there in the dark, one thought kept circling. Would the inspector tip Craig off, give him time to cover tracks, or cook up explanations? The ceiling didn't have any answers, but I stared at it anyway. If you've ever watched a storm roll in across an industrial park, you know that feeling. The quiet before everything breaks loose. Joey's diner wasn't much. Just another greasy spoon with burnt coffee and vinyl booths worn smooth by decades of work clothes. But it had what I needed, a clear view of the plant's main gate, and enough regulars that nobody questioned why I'd parked myself in the corner at 5:30 a.m. More coffee, hun? The waitress, Her name tag said Carol. Had that particular diner efficiency. Pot already tilted before I nodded. Thanks. The mug had that familiar chip on the rim. The kind of detail you notice when you're trying not to watch a clock. Remember those pre-startup checks, where every minute feels like an hour? This was worse. The sun came up like it always did, burning off the morning haze that hung around the cooling towers. Funny how normal everything looked. Same trucks rolling in, same shift change ballet in the parking lot. Hard to believe that somewhere in those buildings, papers were about to hit fans. My phone buzzed. Hank's message was short. Birds landing. I couldn't help myself. Pulled out my logbook and wrote the time. Just like I'd done thousands of times before. Old habits die hard, especially when they're keeping your hands from shaking. Through the diner's window, I watched 3 white government vans glide through the gate like sharks into a swimming pool. Even from here, I could see Craig strutting along the elevated catwalk, all handshakes and corporate sunshine. He had that same stopwatch hanging from his belt, probably timing how fast he could charm an inspector. Look at these numbers, I could almost hear him saying, pointing at the production board like it was the 8th wonder of the world. Same show he'd put on every time corporate visited. The breakfast crowd thinned out as the morning wore on. Carol stopped asking about refills, just kept them coming. The regulars probably thought I was job hunting or going through a divorce. Both reasonable guesses for a man camping in a diner on a weekday morning. More texts from Hank, each one making my stomach twist a little tighter. They're pulling logs, asking for badge records. Conference room's been commandeered. I could picture it. That big glass-walled room where Craig loved to hold court, now filled with people comparing signatures and dates. Somewhere in there was my packet, spreading out across the table like a deck of cards about to show a royal flush. The plant's rhythm changed. You notice these things after enough years. People weren't moving with their usual purpose. They'd cluster, separate, check phones. Voices dropped to murmurs even out in the parking lot. Like everyone could feel the pressure dropping before the thunder. My coffee had gone cold again, but I barely noticed. Every time the diner's door opened, my heart tried to jump out of my throat. Could be Hank with news, could be Craig with security, could be... Then I saw her. The inspector from the coffee shop. Even from across the lot, that blazer and practical walk were unmistakable. She moved with purpose toward the admin building, a familiar-looking folder tucked under her arm. Through the plant's glass front, I watched her intercept Craig on his way to what was probably another performance. She didn't look impressed by his 1,000-watt smile or his outstretched hand. The folder opened. Craig's smile flickered like a fluorescent tube about to burn out. My phone buzzed one last time. Hank again. It's starting. I gripped my coffee mug so hard, I'm surprised it didn't crack. 25 years of experience told me what was coming next. When systems get unstable, collapse happens fast. You ever watch a pressure gauge when you know something's about to blow? That slow, steady climb until the needle hits red? That's what it felt like. Watching my phone light up with Hank's updates from inside. They've got the badge logs pulled up on the projector, Hank texted, cross-referencing everything. I could picture that conference room clear as day. Those long tables under harsh fluorescence, papers spread out like evidence at a crime scene. Craig probably still had that smile plastered on, the one he used when corporate came sniffing around. But smiles don't hold up well under federal scrutiny. Inspectors pointing out dates, came another text. Craig's signature on the Johnson reactor shutdown, May 15th. I remembered that date. Craig had been in Houston for some management seminar, posted pictures of himself at some steakhouse, bragging about expense accounts. Kind of detail that sticks in your mind when you're building a case. The texts kept coming, each one another nail. June 3rd, batch verification. He was at his kid's graduation. July 21st, emergency response drill. Flight records show him in Chicago. Through the diner window, I could see people moving with that special kind of urgency you get when something big is breaking. Safety guys who usually took their time were practically jogging. Even maintenance crews had stopped their usual morning BS sessions. They're pulling up the mislabeled batch reports now, Hank wrote. The ones he marked addressed without fixing anything. Carol came by with more coffee, but I waved her off. My hands were already shaking enough. Inspectors asking him to explain the discrepancies, Hank reported. In plain English, she says. I had to smile at that. Craig loved his corporate buzzwords. Optimization metrics and efficiency protocols. Bet those weren't helping him much now. He's trying to talk about modernization initiatives, came the next update. Inspector keeps cutting him off, pointing at specific dates and signatures. The glass walls of that conference room must have felt like they were closing in. I'd seen Craig handle pressure before, but this was different. This wasn't some production target he could massage, or a safety concern he could bury. This was cold, hard documentation staring him in the face. "He's starting to stutter," Hank texted. "Keeps changing his explanation." Then the hammer fell. "They're calling it probable cause for falsification of federal documents. Security's been notified." My coffee sat forgotten as I watched 2 plant security trucks pull up to the admin building. Not the regular patrols, these were the serious guys. The ones you only saw when something major was going down. "Plant owners just walked in," Hank wrote, looking like thunderclouds. I didn't envy Craig that conversation. Our owners were old-school chemical guys who'd built the place from scratch. They preached safety like religion. Finding out their manager had been falsifying documents? That wasn't just a violation of federal law. It was a personal betrayal. The next text made my throat tight. "They're cuffing him." Right here in the conference room. Through the diner's window, I watched them walk him out. Craig Benton, the man with the stopwatch, the efficiency expert, the one who'd called me too slow, shuffling across the same floor where he'd humiliated me, hands cuffed behind his back. His pressed suit didn't look so sharp anymore. Workers stopped what they were doing, watching in complete silence. You could have heard a wrench drop in that plant. Craig kept his eyes down, but there was nowhere to hide. Every person he'd rushed, every safety concern he'd dismissed, every veteran he'd pushed out, they all saw him do that perp walk. My phone buzzed one last time. Hank's message was simple. "It's done." I sat back in that vinyl booth, feeling something between relief and sadness. The plant deserved better than what Craig had done to it. Places like ours run on trust as much as chemistry. Trust in procedures, trust in each other, trust that everyone's watching out for safety first. I looked down at my old logbook, at all those careful entries recording times and temperatures and pressures. Never thought I'd be logging the minute when karma finally caught up with Craig's stopwatch. My phone rang early the next morning. I was already up, hadn't slept much, truth be told. When you've watched karma play out in real time, your mind tends to keep spinning. "Mr. Mercer?" The voice belonged to Thomas Warner, one of the plant's owners. "Could you meet us at 9? I'd only spoken to Warner once or twice in my 20 years there. He was old guard chemical industry, started as a process engineer back when computers still used punch cards. Built our plant from blueprints to production, treating it more like his child than his business." "Of course, sir," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Hard to do when your future might hinge on the next few hours. You know that feeling when you're walking into something big, but you're not sure if it's good big or bad big? That's how it felt stepping through those front doors again. Security gave me a visitor badge. Weird seeing my photo with visitor stamped across it after all these years. The conference room they led me to was one of those glass-walled ones up front, the kind management used to impress clients. Fresh toner smell hit me as soon as I walked in. Someone had been burning through the printer this morning. Warner sat with 2 other owners, all of them with identical copies of what looked like my safety proposal. "Please sit down," Warner said, gesturing to a chair. The glass walls made me feel like I was in some kind of aquarium, with everyone walking past able to see whatever was about to happen. "First, we want to thank you." I must have looked surprised because he continued. "What you did, bringing those safety violations to light, that took courage. You put people's lives ahead of your own job security. That's the kind of thinking we need more of, not less." My throat got tight. After weeks of being dismissed as disgruntled, hearing someone in power acknowledge the truth, well, it hit harder than I expected. "We've reviewed everything," one of the other owners said, tapping the stack of papers. "The falsified logs, the rushed verifications, the mislabeled batches. It's clear we had a serious cultural problem developing. What we'd like to hear," Warner leaned forward, "is your plan to prevent this from happening again." I'd rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times, but actually being there, having them actually listen, I took a deep breath and opened my logbook. "We need 3 things," I said. "First, real process verification, not just checkboxes, but actual confirmation that safety protocols are being followed. Second, independent audits, regular ones, where operators can report concerns without fear of retaliation. And third," I paused, making sure to meet their eyes, "we need to change how we train. Speed isn't the enemy, but rushing is. We need to reward precision, not just production numbers." Warner nodded slowly. "Those are exactly the changes we need, which is why we'd like you to implement them." I blinked. "Sir, we're offering you reinstatement," he said, "with a promotion to Safety Oversight Manager. Full authority to implement your plan. Reporting directly to ownership. 90 days to get the framework in place. The words took a second to sink in. Not just my job back, but a position where I could actually fix what was broken, where doing things right would be the priority, not just doing things fast. I accept, I said, then added, on one condition. Warner raised an eyebrow. Hank Porter needs to be part of the decision-making process for anything affecting operations. He knows this plant better than anyone, and he never lost sight of what matters. A small smile crossed Warner's face. He looked toward the door. Mr. Porter, would you join us? Hank stepped in from the hallway where he'd been, waiting. For the first time in weeks, his shoulders weren't tight with worry. He gave me a small nod that said more than words could. Later that evening, I walked the plant floor with my visitor badge, noting how different it felt. Operators moved with purpose, but without panic. The constant rush that Craig had created was gone, replaced by something steadier, more sustainable. Outside the locker room, I stopped and pulled out my old hard hat. The thing was scratched and worn, but it had seen me through a lot of truth-telling. I ran my thumb over a deep scuff near the brim, remembering all the times I'd chosen right over fast. Tomorrow morning, this battered helmet would start its second life. And this time, it would stand for something bigger than just my own safety. I pulled into the plant lot just as the sun was breaking over the cooling towers. Funny how different everything looked. In dawn's light, cleaner somehow, like a fresh start. The same concrete, same steel, but the air felt lighter without Craig's stopwatch hanging over everyone's head. His time is money posters still clung to the break room walls, though. Wrinkled reminders of how fast things could change. Just 72 hours ago, he'd been strutting these halls like he owned them. Now he was facing federal charges for falsifying safety documents, his career as dead as yesterday's coffee. You know what they say about pride coming before a fall? Well, Craig's fall came with handcuffs and a public parade past the very workers he'd pushed around. The plant owners made sure everyone saw it too. A real, this is what happens moment. Hard to believe someone so focused on image could lose it all so completely. I checked my watch. 0645. Time for the morning tailgate talk. The crew gathered around, some faces uncertain, others relieved. A few of the younger guys who used to smirk at my old man caution couldn't quite meet my eyes now. Morning, everyone, I started, feeling the weight of what needed saying. We're setting a new pace today. Not slower, not faster, just right. Every valve, every gauge, every verification matters. Because at the end of the shift, what counts isn't how fast we moved, but how many of us are walking out safe. The old-timers nodded. They'd seen enough close calls to know better than to rush. I pulled out a fresh notebook, crisp pages ready for real documentation, not cover-ups. Starting today, we're doing independent audits. Real ones. Any safety concern goes straight to my desk. No filters, no pressure to keep quiet. Hank Porter's coming on as senior advisor to help rebuild our verification culture. Hank stepped forward, those oil-stained hands steady as ever. About time we got back to doing things proper, he said, and I saw shoulders relax across the group. Having him there meant something. A bridge between the old ways and the new reforms. Back in my office, still felt strange calling it that. I mapped out verification drills on a fresh calendar. Real exercises, not checkbox theater. Posted the direct reporting channel right outside my door where nobody could miss it. No more burying concerns. Under efficiency metrics. The morning passed in a blur of paperwork and planning. Around noon, I took a break to set up my new locker. The metal gleamed, unmarked and waiting. I lined up my logbooks on the top shelf. 25 years of careful notes that had finally proved their worth. Looking around the shop floor, I could already feel the difference. Operators moved with purpose, but without panic. Gauges got proper reads, not just glances. The whole place hummed with a steadier rhythm, like a well-tuned engine finding its groove. Last thing before heading back to work was hanging up my old hard hat. The thing was scratched and scuffed, each mark a story of choosing right over rushed. As I set it on the hook, I remembered something my first mentor told me. Patience always outlasts reckless pride. Standing there in that quiet moment, watching my battered helmet settle into its new home, on those spotless locker walls, I knew he'd been right all along. Every patient check, every careful verification, every time we chose safety over speed, it all mattered. Not just for today, but for every shift to come. I heard the steady thrum of the pumps, breathed in that familiar solvent sting, and saw faces that finally understood. Sometimes the fastest way forward is taking time to do things right.